Joining me is Brady Finta, a former FBI agent and founder of the National Elder Fraud Coordination Center. With over 23 years in the FBI, he's led major efforts against organized crime and elder fraud, initiating San Diego's first elder fraud task force. Brady, thank you so much for coming in today. So tell me about the NEFCC. What's the story? How did you come to it? And what do you do?
We call it NEFC, the National Elder Fraud Coordination Center. Was kind of born out of my experience in the FBI. So I had worked vast majority of my career, about 23 years, in transnational organized crime, but really focused at the end in North County, San Diego, on an elder justice task force. And the idea of that was to bring together law enforcement partners to work those cases in San Diego County. Worked great, except for we realized it's really, really tough. Those are hard cases to do. And to tell you the truth, the vast majority of the data used as evidence in those cases, it all comes from the private sector. So when I retired, my thought process was more along the lines of how can the private sector join the fight, right? How can they participate? And the good thing is, there's already a ton of fraud fighters in the private sector, and these big companies in particular, that have great data sets. So I got together with some willing partners, so AARP, Amazon, Google, and Walmart, and we just started. We started taking their fraud investigations and amalgamating them and building kind of really high priority, targetable cases that we can then pass on to federal law enforcement. That's it in a nutshell.
So Brady, what should someone do if they suspect that they're being targeted by a scammer?
First thing they should do is trust their gut. There's actually a great book out there called The Gift of Fear by Gavin DeBecker that basically says, this isn't magic. Like, humans were built with the ability to detect and suspect. But I think all of us have that little voice inside of our head or that little feeling in your stomach, something ain't right here. So the first thing I would say is trust yourself. Second thing I would say is stop. Whatever you're doing, stop. If that's a phone call, hang up. If you're on an online chat, just disconnect. And recognize the fact that these folks, these scammers, and don't get me wrong, they're very good. They're very good at what they do. They know that causing a crisis in their victims' heads is how they not only hook them, but keep them immersed in fraud. It is difficult when you are in crisis to recognize things like that. So the time to prepare and train for this is ahead of time, right? Things like this, talking with your family, your neighbors, your trusted, contacts. And it is kind of similar to being in the military or being in the police. You hear all the time guys say, hey, I just reverted back to my training. It's the same when you're in a crisis situation as a victim. The world kind of grays out. And if you have some training that you can revert to that just says stop, just pause, you can then talk to someone that's not in that crisis state, that actually can say, something ain't right with this, let's take another step. The other thing is this, these scumbags that run these scams, they actually tell you to do things like, hey, whatever you do, don't tell anybody about this, right? Or hurry up, this has to be done immediately. And if you have fear, if you have crisis, or if you have dopamine, right? You're in love, you're about to win the lottery, whatever the case may be, you're more malleable in terms of doing the things that they either tell you to do or not tell you to do. Overall, first of all, is to stop. Whatever it is that you're doing. Stop the conversation, stop the electronic interchange, just stop. Stop the transfers of funds. Take a breath. Contact somebody that is not involved in the fraud. I encourage all companies to, particularly financial institutions, to really push trusted contact programs and really up the rate of the folks participating in those. Because when somebody's not involved in a fraud, they're able to recognize the signs and symptoms because they're not in a crisis state. So I would say, in general, your chances of avoiding the fraud entirely go up and up and up the longer you are away from that conversation.
All right, so let's say unfortunately, you've become a victim, you've been targeted by one of these scams, and, maybe you've lost some amount of money or something, what should you do?
Well, the first thing I think you should do is forgive yourself. It is not your fault. These folks are professionals. It's their job. They're very good at it. They reinvest in it. They train. And you're among many, many, many other Americans who have been victimized. The second thing I would say is, and this is unfortunate because it puts a lot on the victims, is you have to report. You got to report it. My mom said it was okay for me to tell this story, but when I was still in the FBI, I was running the Elder Justice Task Force in San Diego, and it was kind of my life. And she'd come to visit, and before she went home, I sat her down just like this, and I said, "Ma, just want to talk to you about kind of the latest frauds and scams out there." And she kind of rolled her eyes a little bit, and I was like, "No, let's just go through it." And very rightfully so, she said, "I'm not a dummy." And I'm like, "No, she's very smart. She counsels other people on their problems. She's a very smart woman." But I said, "Hey, they're good, right? This is what they do. These are some of the things we should avoid." 5 days later, my son, my 15-year-old, I can see him head peeking me down the corner. And he's on the phone, and I can tell something's wrong on his face. And he puts the phone to his chest, and he says, "Dad, I need you to talk to Grandma, but be nice to her." I was like, why would I not be nice to my mom, right? So I take the phone. Turns out she had called him and not me and told him, "Don't tell your father. But when somebody's in your computer, how do you get them out of there?" Because in those 5 days, they had figured out a way to convince her to allow TeamViewer on her computer, access to some of her accounts, passwords, et cetera, et cetera. And, I really thought, if my mom is a potential victim to a crime like this, who has a chance, right? I'm trying, I failed, obviously. I'm trying to look out for my mom. But I think in the end, we have to instill the idea that we're all in on this together. And if she doesn't report, those facts, those data sets, those bad guy selectors, they're not in the system, right? And we need those at NEFC and also among our law enforcement colleagues to put those cases together. We need those data sets, and we need people to stand up and say, "That's not okay. I'm not going to take this laying down."
And if someone reports it, is there any opportunity for them to get funds back? How does that work?
Yeah, that's probably the second thing I would ask is, when was the last time you made any monetary transactions? Not that it's a hard and fast rule, but usually within 72 hours, there's a real genuine possibility that money or some of that money can be retrieved. Almost, not regardless of the transaction, but for many different types of transactions, right? The FBI has a kill chain process for even international transfers and such. And your banks have the ability to reach out, grab, hold on to funds. There's even fantastic nonprofits out there like Operation Shamrock, unbelievable, that has a network of police officers all across the United States specifically trained just to retrieve money in as fast a manner as possible. So you have to report it. You have to report it immediately. Again, this is unfair to the victims, but unfortunately, there's too many places to report right now. But the more places that you report this, and the more that data ends up in law enforcement, company, and nonprofit hands, the better chances we have of actually doing something with it.
So, let's say, unfortunately, you've become victim of a scam. What should you do? Should you report it? And if you should report it, what are the top 5 places that I should take it to?
Absolutely report it, right? And you're not only looking out for yourself, you're looking out for all those other scam victims out there that are tomorrow's victim. If I had to boil it down, I would say, first and foremost, report it to your bank, particularly if the money came from your bank or your wealth management company, whatever the case may be. Second, I would say you have to report to your local police department. Now, a lot of times they're going to say, "Hey, I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do." Insist on a report. Next, I would say the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center is file a report online. It does ask you to download relevant documents and fill out a big form. A lot of people are hesitant to do that, but it is so necessary. You can also report it in person at any FBI field office or resident agency. And I would also say the FTC Consumer Sentinel program really disseminates their fraud reporting to a lot of different places. So it's a lot on the victims to report to so many places, but it's necessary and it's worth it. And if we don't have that reporting, it's really hard to do anything about it. So I really encourage folks, even if you're past that 72-hour mark, to consider reporting it to Operation Shamrock. Operation Shamrock trains police officers all around the country to immediately act on these investigations to try to claw back as much money as they can as fast as they can. And if there's not a local police officer in your city that knows how to do that, they will find one that can help.
Are there any other resources that you recommend?
Absolutely. The Fraud Watch hotline for AARP actually kind of spans the whole spectrum of victim needs. So whether you're in crisis, and hopefully you've already reported it to law enforcement, but you've become a victim, now you're dealing with the loss of incredible amounts of money and guilt and fear and pain and maybe even health issues. They offer services to all those victims to find a place that they can help them.
Do you have any final advice?
I would say trust no one. Zero trust policy right now, where we are as a society, is the safest place to be. And I know it's a sad state of affairs, but trust no one. Even when you're trying to validate whether or not a pop-up or an offer or an edict from an agency is real or not, AI, good fraud scripts, they're all so convincing that even a normal person's attempt to validate some of this information falls short. Unfortunately, I would say zero trust policy is the way to go. We should be encouraging this to be a national thought process. Like, this is bigger than all of us. It's bigger than people. It's bigger than companies. It's bigger than the U.S. government. Like, it needs to be kind of a whole of society, problem that we delve into. We have to treat it like the national security threat that it is. Because when $80 billion a year leaves the pockets of just older Americans, where does it go? Right? It goes to organized crime groups overseas. Some in countries that are adversarial to the United States, bent on destroying our economy and hurting people. But we don't treat it that way, right? We treat terrorism that way. We treat drugs that way. We treat crimes against children that way. We treat healthcare fraud that way. But when it comes to elder fraud, it's kind of like every man for themselves. I think our companies need to say, hey, this is not a proprietary problem. We're all in on this together. Name me a company that wants fraud. Doesn't exist. Also with our government, everybody needs to realize there's no parties or opinions here. We need to protect our parents and our grandparents and the savings that they worked sometimes 50, 60, 70 years to accumulate, and now it's gone. We're not doing a good enough job as a country coming together and sharing what we need to make a difference. So I would say, not to just individuals, but I would say to everyone, let's change the thought process on this. Let's just say no to fraud or whatever we could come up with, and get together as a whole of society to help end this. That's one thing we're hoping we can do at NEFC, is be a big part of bringing that together.
Do you have any estimates for the amount of people that are impacted and what the financial loss is for those?
Unfortunately, we do have to estimate, because the reporting is so bad that I think most people think it's around 6 to 8% of the victims actually report. So I think the FTC has probably done the best job in extrapolating, and the losses last year, actually 2024, they estimated at $81 billion. just in that year and just among elders. The previous year, in 2023, it was about 61 billion. So name another crime in America that went up by 30%, affects well over 1 million Americans, and absolutely destroys the financial welfare of so many homes. Doesn't exist. Find somebody that doesn't have a personal story or know someone that does who's affected by this crime. It's hard. It's a hard thing to do.
Everyone has a personal story of someone that's affected by this.
No doubt. And it's a greater, honestly, 81 billion is greater than the GDP of about 120 countries in the world, if you put it at scale there. I actually did the calculations just to create an analogy where I think people would remember it a little bit more. So 81 billion seconds is about 2,570 years. Right, so well before Jesus. 600 million seconds, which is, I think, close to about the money we retrieved last year from these frauds, is about 19 years, not even before Facebook, right? So when you look at that, the money that's going out and the amount that we're able to prevent, it's almost inconceivable.
Well, this is clearly a major epidemic. So thank you so much for what you and your organization do.